way if I need to do anything in the actual, like kick anybody out or
Okay.
delete. All right, thanks, Scott. Attendees, all right, the attendees are looking at speaker view. Whenever you're ready, I can start the webinar. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I should be able to screen share, yeah?
Yeah, as a co-host, yeah. Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the National Constitution Center's kind of pre-President's Day presidential trivia. People are still entering, so we're going to get started in just a minute, but I'm Jenna, and I'm here with my colleague, Angela, and we're going to have some fun on this Friday doing some presidential trivia. You'll get to show us your knowledge of our commanders-in-chief. In the meantime, if you want to tell us where you're coming from, if you have any questions for us, you can go ahead and put all of that in the chat, and we'll say hi. Give it one more second for people to join. Hello from Phoenix. Hi, Don from Phoenix. All right, hello from New Jersey, right over the bridge. We can see you from the Constitution Center. All right, I think people are still joining, but we're going to get started because it is 1 o'clock. So we are recording. I think we're recording. Well, hello, everybody, and happy President's Day weekend. We are really excited to celebrate President's Day here at the National Constitution Center and also with you across the nation. And we're kicking off this weekend today with some presidential trivia, but be sure to tune in all weekend long. We have some scholars tomorrow and then a whole bunch of scholar talks on Monday, as well as some more trivia and some other fun stuff like our presidential town hall with some famous founding fathers from history. So there's a lot of great programs. That's all on our website, constitutioncenter.org. So make sure to check that out. Like I said a little earlier, I am Jenna, but I am actually going to hand everything over to my wonderful colleague, Angela, who's going to lead us in some presidential trivia, but I will be on the chat. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know and I'll be kind of moderating the chat. All right, Angela, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome again. I am so excited that you are all here joining me today for our presidential trivia. We're going to learn so much about this executive office, our commander-in-chief. I'm hoping that you are going to enjoy this trivia. The way it's going to be set up is we have 5 rounds with 5 questions per round. When you are ready to submit your answer, please put it in the chat. And we will be able to see your answers, and then we will all receive the correct answer at the end. I'll give you a couple seconds to put those answers in the chat. But so for today, I am going to be your Alex Trebek, your Steve Harvey, and let's get started. All right, let me bring up our presentation here, and we will start the ball rolling. All right, so here we have it, our Hail to the Chief, the game of presidential trivia. All right, so our first question to kick things off is going to be in round 1 here, which our category is going to be the first president. So these are all going to be some presidential precedents that we're going to be looking at here in this first category. So question number 1 for category number 1 will be, who was the first person elected president of the United States? Is it going to be A, Benjamin Franklin, B, George Washington, or C, John Adams? When you have your answer ready, please put it into the chat to lock in your answer. All right, who was the first person elected president of the United States? A, Benjamin Franklin, B, George Washington, or C, John Adams? All right, looks like we have some people already submitting their answers in the chat. Wonderful. Good to see these answers coming in. I will give it just another 30 seconds. All right, I think it looks like we have most of our answers locked in. So who in fact was the first president elected to be president of the United States? It is going to be answer B. George Washington is going to be our first president. We have a lovely picture here of him featured on the left-hand side. George Washington will be our first commander-in-chief, and he's actually going to set quite a few precedents during his time in office. All right, we had a lot of answers coming in with the correct answer on that one, so congratulations to you all. For any of my friends who are keeping track, maybe are being a little bit competitive today, feel free to keep record of your own. This is all in good fun. Honesty is the best policy. So we'll be moving right along to question number 2, which is going to be right here. Who was the first president to represent the Republican Party? Is it going to be A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Ulysses S. Grant, or C, Benjamin Harrison? Who was the first president to represent the Republican Party? A, Abraham Lincoln, B, Ulysses S. Grant, or C, Benjamin Harrison? I'll give it a few more seconds and I will save you all my poor rendition of the Jeopardy soundtrack. All right, seems like we have most of our answers already locked in. So who was the first president to represent the Republican Party? It will be Abraham Lincoln. Yes, Abraham Lincoln. Believe it or not, our 16th president. It'll take until the 16th president to establish this Republican Party. All right, moving right along, question 3. Who was the first president to represent the Democratic Party? Is it A, Thomas Jefferson, B, Andrew Jackson, or C, James Buchanan? We asked you who was the first one to represent the Republican Party, so we of course had to ask the flip side. Who was the first president to represent the Democratic Party? Put those answers in the chat there. Do you believe it was A, Thomas Jefferson, B, Andrew Jackson, or C, James Buchanan? This one seems to be getting a bit more dissent in the chat. Give it a couple more seconds before we reveal the final answer. All right. Who was the first president to represent the Democratic Party? It is going to be B, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson will be the first president to represent the Democratic Party. All right, coming up, question next we're going to have is, who was the first president to travel outside of the United States while in office? Was it A, James K. Polk, B, Theodore Roosevelt, or perhaps C, Woodrow Wilson? The first president to travel outside of the United States while in office. Remember to plug those answers in the chat there. Wow, we seem to be pretty confident in our answers in these. I'm surprised. This was a fun fact that I had to learn recently, so I'm glad that you all seem to be enjoying this one and seem like you know it. I'm impressed. We have some presidential aficionados here in the group. All right, so the first president to travel outside of the United States while in office would in fact be B, Theodore Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt, our first president to travel outside of the US while in office. All right, our last question for this first round here, wondering about the first president, the last question will be, who was the first president born after the Declaration of Independence? Will it be A, James Monroe, B, John Quincy Adams, or C, Martin Van Buren? To give us some context here, the Declaration of Independence would be written and signed at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It'll be approved on July 4th of 1776. So that'll help you narrow down some years there. So who was the first president born after the Declaration of Independence? Ooh, this last question seems to be a bit tricky. Okay, to close out first round of presidential trivia here, our first round of 5, the correct answer is going to be C, Martin Van Buren. Look at him and his fabulous mutton chops there. Yes, Martin Van Buren would be the first president to be born after the Declaration of Independence. How did you do out of our first 5 questions? Drop it in the chat how many you got correct out of 5. I'd love to see how we're ranking up here just at the beginning of our game at the end of our first round. Oh, all right. Awesome. We've got some 3s, we've got some 4s. Oh my gosh, somebody has them all correct. Well, for my friend who has them all correct, we're going to have to see if we can stump you moving forward. So our next chance here, round 2, our category is going to be the last president, the last president. So this will be the last president to do insert certain thing here that we're going to be asking about. So our first question to kick off round 2 will be, who was the last president to be inaugurated right here in Philadelphia? Was it A, President George Washington, B, John Adams, or C, Thomas Jefferson? Who was the last president to be inaugurated in Philadelphia? As a Philadelphia person myself, I think they all should be inaugurated in Philadelphia, but that is not the case anymore. So which one would be the last one to be inaugurated in Philadelphia? George Washington, John Adams, or Thomas Jefferson? All right, seems like most of us have locked in our answer in the chat. So the last president to be inaugurated in Philadelphia would be John Adams. Yes, only 2 presidents inaugurated here in Philadelphia. What a shame. So we would have George Washington inaugurated here and also John Adams. Okay, next up, which era of good feelings president was the last to win every possible state in the Electoral College? Would it be A, James Monroe, B, Franklin Roosevelt, or C, Ronald Reagan? Pretty impressive feat here, the last president to win every possible state in the Electoral College. Certainly doesn't happen very often these days. So are we thinking it's James Monroe, Franklin Roosevelt, or Ronald Reagan? The era of good feelings here just gives you kind of a hint to the time frame. Era of good feelings, when was that? Okay, which era of good feelings president was the last to win every possible state in the Electoral College? Our answer is going to be A, James Monroe. James Monroe. Pretty impressive feat there, Mr. James Monroe, winning every possible state in the Electoral College. Okay, number 3. Who was the last former Secretary of State to be elected president? It's going to be A, Martin Van Buren, B, James Buchanan, or C, Gerald Ford? The last former Secretary of State to be elected president. Oh my gosh, we seem to have a consensus coming in here in the chat. All right, how are we doing? Who was the last former Secretary of State to be elected president? Oh, I see some last minute answers coming in. The last former Secretary of State to be elected president was C, James Buchanan. C, James Buchanan. So he is going to be our 15th president from Pennsylvania. Woo! Okay, coming up next, who was the last president to represent the Whig Party? A, William Henry Harrison, B, Zachary Taylor, or C, Millard Fillmore? Who was the last president to represent the Whig Party? right. Who was the last president to represent the Whig Party? It is going to be C, President Millard Fillmore. The last question coming up in this category here is going to be, who was the last president born in the 1800s? A, Harry Truman, B, Dwight Eisenhower, or C, Lyndon Johnson? The last president to be born in the 1800s. I must admit, this question is pretty tough. I'm not familiar with all of the president's birth dates, but maybe some of you presidential aficionados are. All right, was it Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower, or Lyndon Johnson? Oh, thank you, Max, for the compliment. I appreciate it so much. We are only partway through here with our trivia, so there is a lot more to come. I'm glad you are enjoying it. But to close out this second round here, the last president to be born in the 1800s is going to be Dwight Eisenhower. Yes, Dwight Eisenhower. Okay. I hope we are still doing well here. I want to check in with my friends who said that they had 5 out of 5 on their first category, and I want to see if we're still keeping that 100% record there. I think a few of those were some stumpers, so I want to hear if I caught you. Ha ha ha. Good, good. I'm glad these questions were a little bit more challenging for some of you out there. Had some fun this round. All right, our next round, round 3, is going to be the only president. So this will be the only president. Okay, starting off round 3, question number 1, the only president. Who is the only person to serve more than 2 terms as president of the United States? Is it going to be A, Ulysses S. Grant, B, Theodore Roosevelt, or C, Franklin Roosevelt? The only person to serve more than 2 terms. Interesting. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, you guys are knocking this one out of the park. I want to give a round of applause to some of your history teachers here because you guys are really nailing this question. So I will tell you that you are correct. The only person to serve more than 2 terms as president of the United States would in fact be Franklin Roosevelt. Congratulations, everyone, you nailed that. All right, now they're not all going to be this easy, I promise. So ramping up on the scale of hardness here, we are going to have our next question. Who is the only person to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president? Was it A, Franklin Pierce, B, Grover Cleveland, or C, Benjamin Harrison? All right, there seems to be some disagreement in the chat, so I'm happy to see that I have stumped a few of you. I told you they wouldn't all be quite that easy. Who is the only person to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president? Okay, here we go. The final reveal. We had some debate here in the chat between whether it was B, Grover Cleveland, or C, Benjamin Harrison. And the answer is, in fact, B, Grover Cleveland. Yes, Grover Cleveland was the only person to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president. Next up, who is the only person to have been elected president and vice president twice? A, John Adams, B, Richard Nixon, or C, George H.W. Bush? What do we think here? The only person to have been elected president and vice president twice. It's a pretty impressive statistic we have here. Only person to be elected president and vice president twice. Can you imagine being elected to both of those offices twice? Must have had quite the headache by the time he was done serving in the Oval Office. Hoo. This one was a challenge. All right, the big reveal here, the only person to have been elected president and vice president twice. B, Richard Nixon. B, Richard Nixon. Okay, still got two more questions coming up in this third round here. Who is the only person to serve as president and vice president without being elected to either office? A, Millard Fillmore, B, Andrew Johnson, or C, Gerald Ford? Now, how does that even work? How could you possibly serve as president and vice president without being elected? Oh, well, you all seem to know the answer. I wonder if any of my friends out there were alive for this. You don't have to tell me if you were alive or not. We don't have to know age. I won't share mine. You don't have to share yours. All right. The answer to who is the only person to serve as president and vice president without being elected to either office is C, Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford. Pretty interesting fact there, huh? All right, our last question to close out this round. Who is the only president to serve 2 full terms without using a veto? A, George Washington, B, Thomas Jefferson, or C, George W. Bush? So this veto power here of the executive office, the ability to override something that Congress has passed and send it back to them. Now, of course, Congress still does have the ability to override a veto with a 2/3 majority. But who is the only president to have never even used one, to have served their 2 full terms without ever using their veto power? Okay. All right. The answer to this one to close out round 3 is C, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson. All right, and that will bring us to the close of round 3 and the start of round 4. How are we doing? Let me know if we're doing well in the chat here. Hopefully, even if we're not doing well, we are having fun anyway, because that's the whole goal here. Hopefully you're learning something and also having a good time while you're doing it. Okay, awesome. All right, round 4, our topic is going to be platforms and policies. So let's see what we know about our president's platforms and policies. First up, which president promised a New Deal for the American people? Was it A, Woodrow Wilson, B, Warren Harding, or C, Franklin Roosevelt? Which president had the platform of the New Deal? New Deal. Makes me wonder what the old deal was. That was a bad joke. You don't have to laugh at it. Which president promised a New Deal for the American people? Okay. All right. This one we seem to have a consensus in the chat as well. So I will just tell you that you are correct. It is indeed C, Franklin Roosevelt. The only president to serve more than 2 terms, and also this president here who promised a New Deal for the American people. Of course, this is going to come during the Great Depression. You guys are just nailing it. All right, moving right on to question 2. Which president told the audience to, quote, read my lips, no new taxes, at the Republican National Convention in 1988? Was it A, Gerald Ford, B, George H.W. Bush, or C, George W. Bush? All right, so we've got the 2 Bushes up there for our options, as well as Gerald Ford. If you need a hint there, we've got that little hint for you that at the Republican National Convention in 1988, that might narrow it down a little bit for you. Okay, it seems like our debate in the chat is coming down to whether or not it was Bush the father or Bush the son. Well, I will tell you, it was George H.W. Bush. Yes, George H.W. Bush would say, read my lips, no new taxes. Okay. Which president's opposition to the second bank of the United States was central to his bid for re-election? Was it A, James Madison, B, Andrew Jackson, or C, John Tyler? All right, so we've got to dig back in the memory banks for this one, our early American history. Which president's opposition to the second bank of the United States was central to his bid for re-election? All right. The answer here is going to be B, Andrew Jackson. Yes, Andrew Jackson was not a fan of the central bank of the United States. Okay. Which president's Great Society policies included Medicare, Medicaid, and the Voting Rights Act? Was it A, Franklin Roosevelt, B, Harry Truman, or C, Lyndon Johnson? Great Society policies including Medicare, Medicaid, and the Voting Rights Act. Oh, we're doing well on this one too. I want to give you all a big A+ here on this one. Yes, it is going to be C, Lyndon Johnson, who is going to have these Great Society policies of Medicare, Medicaid, and the Voting Rights Act. Wonderful. You guys are doing really awesome in this category. Which president campaigned for re-election in 1916 with the slogan, "He kept us out of war"? Was it A, Woodrow Wilson, B, Warren Harding, or C, Calvin Coolidge? Who kept us out of war? And which war? Well, thinking back to 1916 here, that might help you narrow it down a little bit. Man, you guys are a champion in this category. Another consensus here for our last question of our fourth round. It is indeed A, President Woodrow Wilson, who would campaign for re-election in 1916 with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." It would be World War I that he is referring to. Okay, here it is for all the bacon. Our last round, round 5, the presidency and the Constitution. Let me know if we're still hanging on in there in the chat. I hope that you are still enjoying this and that you can keep up as we finish out our final round here. This is for all the big bucks. Okay, round 5, the presidency and the Constitution. Question number 1. Who officially elects the president of the United States? Is it A, we the people, B, the Board of Elections, or C, the Electoral College? Who officially elects the president of the United States? All right, for all of these questions in this category, we're going to be able to rely on our knowledge of the text of the Constitution. So let's see here. Looks like we're doing pretty good in the chat. All of our constitutional scholars out there. Have you been joining us for other sessions? Seems like you've learned well about this Constitution. It is, in fact, going to be C, the Electoral College, who officially elects the President of the United States. Good job, everybody. Number 2, how many electoral votes are contested during each presidential election? Is it A, 435, B, 538, or C, 650? What do we think? How many electoral votes are contested during each presidential election? This one requires a little bit of math here. Can give you a little bit of a hint. It's going to be the number of members of the Senate as well as the House of Representatives. A little bit of math there might be a little hint for you. All right. How many electoral votes are contested during each presidential election? It will be B, 538. Wonderful. Okay, coming at you fast. If no candidate wins a majority of the electoral votes, Who selects a winner from the top 3 candidates receiving electoral votes? Is it going to be A, the House of Representatives, B, the Senate, or C, the Supreme Court? Here we have a nice example of our balance of powers here, the other branches being represented in this selection of the executive office. Do we think it was A, the House of Representatives, B, the Senate, or C, the Supreme Court? Believe it or not, when the founders actually wrote the Constitution, they thought that this body would have a lot more say in the presidential selection, that they believed that most votes would, or most elections would end up being decided by this body. So who might I be referring to? We are talking about A, the House of Representatives. We had some debate there whether or not it was the House of Representatives or the Senate, but yes, it is the House of Representatives. All right, we have 2 more here, 2 more. What supermajority is needed in both the House of Representatives and the Senate in order to override a veto by the president? If you were paying attention earlier, I said it. So hopefully we were all listening. We've got A, 9/16, B, 2/3, or C, 3/4. What do we think? 9/16, 2/3, or 3/4? All right, like I said, I snuck in the answer to this one a little bit earlier. So if you were paying attention, you probably know this one. All right, the fraction here that is going to be the supermajority needed in both the House and Senate to override a veto by the president is going to be B, 2/3. 2/3. Okay, now this one here is for all of the life bonus points. The final question that we have in our presidential trivia here, learning about the executive office in celebration of President's Day weekend, is coming up right now. Here we go. Prior to the 22nd Amendment, on which day did inaugurations take place? Was it A, March 4th, B, April 30th, or C, July 4th? This one might require us to think back in our brains a little bit. March 4th, April 30th, or July 4th? So actually, all the way back in 1913, there was a protest, a march, a parade for women's suffrage, which was actually held just the day before this inauguration was to take place, the inauguration of President Woodrow Wilson. You're going to have hundreds of women flooding the streets in front of Washington, D.C., asking for the ability to participate in this great democracy and to be included in that idea of we the people. So I'm going to tell you that these women were marching in front of the White House on March 3rd of 1913. So that is going to make our answer March 4th. Yes, prior to the 22nd Amendment, Inauguration Day used to take place on March 4th. All right, that is going to close out our final round and end our presidential trivia here. Let me know how well you did in the chat. I am sure you have all learned so much here today. I hope I stumped a few of you on a couple of questions. There's always room to learn, right? So I thank you all so much again for joining us. Again, like Jenna had said, we have a number of fantastic programs that are going to be coming up here all weekend long in order to celebrate President's Day here at the National Constitution Center. A number of scholar talks coming up online and other fantastic things for you all to tune into. So I hope that you have enjoyed this program, and I will let Jenna wrap us up here.
Thanks, Angela. Let me finish your spotlight. Thank you, Angela. That was fantastic. I hope everybody got to show their presidential knowledge, and we hope to see you either at the center or online for the rest of the weekend as we celebrate President's Day weekend. So thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.